Hi and welcome to Best in Tesla. So the energy generation is booming, and what seems to become a big part of this is of course energy storage that Tesla is a big player in. That will make power plants more efficient and make 100% renewable energy possible. At the same time, we have EVs rising combined with the energy hungry AI data center, all of which requires a lot of batteries and the materials that goes into the battery and into the production of the batteries and energy generation itself. That is why I have invited John Lee back on the show, CEO of CleanTech CTV. He has almost 25 years of experience in the mining industry and has raised more than $130 million for mining exploration. Today we will talk a bit more of what is happening in the mining space and what fluorspar is and why that is so important, as it is basically the common denominator in everything from all kinds of batteries to solar to nuclear plants. So this material is very important for everyone in this space. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So thank you, John, for joining me on this interview. Last time we talked, it's almost 3 years ago now, where we talked a lot about the nickel supply and how many automakers was buying nickel on paper with the battery suppliers, where Tesla went all the way to the mining companies to get the nickel, to buy the real nickel. Yeah, but there is apparently not a new material, but something that not many people have heard about. That is at least as important as nickel and lithium and so on. But John, for the people that don't know who you are, who is CleanTech and what do you do, and why have you bought a fluorspar project in the US? And what is fluorspar?
Yes. Well, Lars, I'm very glad to be back on your show. And I've been in the mining industry for almost 25 years now. I actually graduated from Rice University with a degree in engineering economics and started my career in the Silicon Valley in the early 90s. That's when the eBays and the Yahoos started. And I retired, semi-retired in 2000. I was lucky at the top of the .com era at that time. And then getting into the mining industry by accident. So the first 10 years from 2000 to 2010, I was an investor. And then from 2010 to 2015, the last 15 years, I was running mining companies. My interest has always been in precious metals. And this was nickel, which piqued my interest when nickel went from $10 to $20 very sort of in the early 2008, 2010 period. So that's how I got interested in nickel. CleanTech, the previous name was Flying Nickel. We acquired a nickel company, a nickel project in Canada. And that's why I come on your show talking about the merits of nickel. And unfortunately, our project, well, it's good and the bad. Our project got permitted, and then the First Nations, the Aboriginals, of which the project sits in Canada, got so interested that they forced us out. It's business. It's okay. It's their land. And unfortunately, in Canada, First Nations, as you know, they own their land, right? It's a country. So there's not really a whole lot to adjudicate. And the federal people were very hands-off in any issues amongst First Nations and business in their land. So we were asked to leave politely, and we received an offer, and we just have to go. It's a blessing in disguise. That's how sort of we got into this fluorspar space, Lars.
Oh, okay.
But I think before we talk about it, I felt like I briefly watched the show we have, which was over an hour. It was fascinating. We talked about the nickel. We talked about the nickel market and how Tesla approached how Tesla approached nickel in securing sort of the market supply for the critical elements of which required to run the business, and that it went directly after the nickel mines, not just relying on the word from the battery suppliers. So I thought it was very genius of Elon Musk to understand the issue and find solutions for them.
Yeah.
And I'm a very big fan of Elon. I watch him I follow him very, very closely, and unfortunately got in a bit of a spat politically and facing extremely steep competition from the likes of BYD and of the Chinese. He's going to have some problem on his hands. The production is going to plateau at around 2 million units a year. And if you don't mind talking about it, I think it's important. It's just interesting to share with you, because I was in China, and half the cars, if not more, are EVs. And the early advantage that Elon had, I will probably draw a parallel to Apple, was Apple understood that the iPhone, which was invented almost 20 years ago, it's not about a phone. It's about the camera on the phone. It's about connectivity. It's about how great the camera that it had. You can snap photos so quick, right? So you occupy half of the market share, mostly from the women audience. Now, the advantage Tesla had for Elon early going is his battery, is his performance. It's not about handling. It's not about styling. It's not about functioning or the rise. You have a Model 3. I mean, I don't think it rides much different from, say, a Kia or from Honda or Volkswagen, depending on how firm or how soft you want your ride to be. But it's always about the performance. It's always about the batteries.
Oh, John, you're falling a bit out here.
A little bit of a bad issue. So let me try to close up some. And Lars, the battery technology had advanced so much, and the Chinese has caught up so quickly that I don't think that Elon had. Well, maybe he still has, but the advantage he has is not as the gap is narrowing very, very quickly. So the battery performance or the EV car performance from 0 to 60 is there's no longer that distinctive edge that Tesla has. And while in the meantime, the Chinese are very good at a lot of these features, right? You have cars that can jump, cars that can do a 360, cars that handles well. You have cars that has a lot of luxury amenities within the cabin, of which Tesla are still, resorting back, it was 10 years ago. So I think that now is a more damage control, and Elon got to really step back and then focus his attention on Tesla and lesser away from the other ventures. And I was so surprised. Maybe he was just a patch-up answer. He was talking about he wasn't studying on BYD and the features and the cars that they have. I mean, it's tremendous that has advanced so much. And one thing I also want to share is the reason Chinese caught up so much on EV is versus ICE was the ICE took 50, 70 decades to get to where they are. The Volkswagens, the Porsche, the Mercedes, right? The Fords, the GMs. They started their engine building back in the early 90s, early 1900s. Yeah. And ICE has upwards of 1,000, 2,000 components. And that's that Chinese was never able to catch up to it. And with the advent of EVs, they didn't have the problem. And so it's all battery tech. And this is why we're talking about battery tech going forward. And I was very gung-ho on nickel, thinking it might have 3 to 5 years of longevity, dominance before the new technology come. But what has happened in the last 3 years, two and a half years since we talked, is astounding. Yeah. In that the density, the energy density has almost doubled. The range is doubled almost from 200 to almost 500 miles. And now there's a new technology. Well, there has always been new technology, the hydrogen cells, liquid state batteries. But just in the last 6 months, I would say there's no question that even since we talked, right, MNCA 11, the nickel battery was the de facto highest performance. But now the LFP has almost caught up to it, and has lion shares in the lithium battery space. So it's interesting that if you look at it from an engineer or from a marketer, from the capitalist perspective, and look at the composition of a battery, the makeup of a battery, well, you have an anode. That's when you're charging the anode. That's carbon. That's very cheap. That's graphite. The reason graphite is it has a lot of patterns that can trap electrons, right? So it's already very cheap. But if you look at the cathode, and there has to be a transition metal, and transition metal, the definition that it has to be able to absorb and release electrons quickly without degradation. So you need to have a positive. You need to have a metal, transition metal, that can lose or gain electrons in its outer orbits easily. So the transition metals are manganese, nickel, cobalt, and iron, right? But iron is always sort of the poor man's cathode because it's less conductive, it's heavy, it's bulky, and it just doesn't discharge as well. But so you started out with the exotics, the cobalts, and now we're down to LFP with iron phosphates. I mean, this is as cheap as you can get. So the guys are like, okay, now the anode and cathodes are conquered, but what about the electrolyte, right? What is about lithium? I want to be clear, Lars, for your audience, and as I'm just sort of catching up to my physics that I learned from school and try to brush up on it. When you have a battery, the charge and discharge doesn't happen within the battery. It's within the cables. So when you're discharging the battery, what happens is you have the lithium carbide in the anode. So the carbide, so the electrons is released from the anode, from the lithium carbide to your motor, electrical motor, or to your light bulb, right? To your computers or to your cell phones, and then the current goes. Then the electron then go recycle back to the cathode, which would be iron phosphate or NMC11. So it's start accumulating electrons. So as you start accumulating electrons, it becomes more and more negatively charged. So this is where the lithium ion, right, which used to be deposited in the anode with the carbon, then will flow lithium to the cathode. So it's a refuge. It's a storage solution. And so then the cathode becomes cobalt, manganese, nickel, lithium mix, right? So in the case would be lithium LFP, right? Lithium iron, ferro, and phosphate. So that's how the battery works. And then when you're charging, so instead of a motor in the middle, then you're plugging a voltage device to charge the battery. Then what happens is the electron would then flow back from the cathode. That is cobalt and manganese and nickel and ferro back externally to the anode for the graphite to be deposited to be graphite to be charged with the electron again. So as the graphite gains more electrons, becomes more negatively charged, it needs to be balanced out. So that is where the lithium, it needs to hold. So the lithium is used to hold the electrons. It's a storage, it's a holding device. Then the lithium is going to swim, right, in the battery from the cathode back to the anode to be married for to be holding the charge. So the lithium is holding that charge, become lithium carbide with the electrons of which you're plugging into your car. So that's how this thing works. There's actually not electricity or electrons that's moving with your batteries. So with all that in mind, we have cheaply commercialized the anode that's carbon, that's cheap, and the cathode, which is iron and phosphate, that's fertilizer, that's also very abundantly available. So now people are focusing on, that's why people are now tackling lithium, even though lithium is not super expensive, is readily available and prices come down 50%. But the efforts to replace lithium has started 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And now what they have found is they have found sodium ion battery. It's called SiB, sodium ion batteries. So the guys, the soldiers that's holding the charge on the anode and the cathode, is being changed from lithium to sodium. And the downside for sodium, it was never the technology. It was never the exotic solution you got to fix. It's always the density charge. So for lithium battery, you're looking at 200 watt per kilograms, and 200 to 300, and sodium is always around 100, 200. But sodium density is catch up, charge density is catch up to around 70% of lithium. So lithium right now is at about 300 watt per kilogram, and now watt hour per kilogram, and now sodium is getting up to 200 watt hour per kilogram. So a typical battery, Tesla Model 3 at around 70 kilowatt hour would be about 500 kilograms batteries that's sitting on your Tesla right now. Yeah. I mean, before long, you can achieve the same density performance from a sodium ion battery at around adding about net, right, 5% of your overall car weight, because you're adding 200 kilograms in your batteries to get the same density. But a Tesla Model 3 is about 1,500 kilograms. So you're adding roughly 2 to 3%, not even 5% of your car weight. But you can realize quite substantial saving. The cost of a sodium battery per kilowatt hour right now is under 100. It could go to $50 kilowatt hour, and whereas lithium batteries right now is getting stuck at around 120 to 150. I mean, that is a far improvement from the 300 to 500 when we started all of this talks about 5 years ago. Yeah. So I think with the backdrop of that, there's going to be a cap on the lithium price. There's going to be a cap on the lithium price because they have found a replacement for the electrolyte, and there's going to be a cap on the MNC, on the manganese, on the nickel, on the cobalt prices, because they already found a replacement in iron phosphate and in the cathode, and anode is carbon, so it's cheap, right? Yeah. With all that said, I think for investors looking to invest in the raw materials and ride the EV wave and ride the battery wave, as I'm studying, and I said, wow, the common denominator, interestingly, is phosphate. Not phosphate, it's fluoride, because fluoride is the negative charge ion that enables the lithiums and the sodium to be swimming between the anode and the cathode. And again, just to recap, when you're discharging the battery to your motor or to your light bulb or to your cell phone, the electrons going from the anode to the cathode, and then lithium is then released from the anode to swim across the battery to be stored in the cathode, which is now increasingly become negative charge because the electron flow to the cathode. And then vice versa, when you are charging, then the electrons going from the cathode externally to the anode, but for the anode to hold that charge, lithium needs to swim back, right, to the anode. But that lithium is being displaced by sodium. Nonetheless, this lithium, in order for it to be stable in the electrolyte, it has to be married to either an oxide compound or to a fluoride compound that's negatively charged. And so that would stabilize the lithium ion, positive lithium ion, to go back and forth. So this is really in a 15 minutes physics 101 how batteries work. I don't think, you know what, funny enough, a lot of the Tesla investors or metals investors, they don't actually understand. So they keep chasing, right? What is the next shiny object without realizing that, so the substitutions and the nature of the substitutions and which part of the batteries that your investment is getting substituted. Yeah.
So Fluorspar, you've just invested in a big project in the US, as I understand it, in Kentucky.
Yes.
Yeah. So that should also be very important with all this trade wars going on, and Chinese sitting on all their materials for EV batteries. If I'm not mistaken, the Fluorspar was like 60% of all Fluorspar consumption in 2023 was from China. So this should not just be important for you and every battery storage and EV maker in the US, but also for US in general.
Right, Lars, you're right. It's funny enough that Trump talks about supply, domestic supply production for EVs, for smelters, for steel, for aluminum. He put a big tariff on aluminum and steel, and the cars, 100% tariff on cars. Everything I mentioned, and then all those things require power, and the power needs to be generated either solar or nuclear. Everything I just mentioned requires fluorspar. And it's not, I'm not kidding. And that's why I would say that world will cease to function without fluorspar. And how fluorspar works, I have to give you a 2-minute primer. Fluorspar used to be not as critical, but fluorspar is the most toxic and reactive element in the periodic table. So, fluorspar can eat glass and silicon. You can think of it like a Victoria's Secret model, right? It would react with everything. Like even the most nerdy guy would still look at the model and it'll be drilling all. An example of that would be, for example, fluorspar is now used in semiconductors. But before, fluorspar is not as widely utilized because it is so toxic. It's so corrosive. And you need a lot of handling, and we didn't have the apparatus and protective gears and the precision to utilize fluorspar. It's almost like the women is so toxic that you don't have a Chad to tame the model. But now we do. So if you look at all the ASML machines from the Netherlands, TSMCs, all the semiconductors require fluorspar to create patterns. You're talking atomic level patterns in the wafer. And requires it also requires fluorspar gas to absorb all the debris and toxic. It's a cleaning agent. Okay. And then if you like uranium, how uranium's enriched, just for your audience, quick, and we'll get to batteries, is that fluorspar has to leach onto uranium to levitate uranium oxide to uranium hexafluoride, which is gaseous. And from there, you can do centrifugal or through diffusion to enrich, to concentrate the U-235, which is 0.7% of the of the uranium ore, and then from 0.7% to 5%. The remainder uranium is U-238, which is a lot more common. But it's the 235 you need to fit into its fissile for the nuclear fission.
So fluorspar is also needed for nuclear power. You have to
levitate gas. You have to you have to break the UO3, and then the only way to break that is you put fluorspar in there, right? Okay. So now let's talk about Elon Musk, Tesla 3. In order for Tesla 3 to be made in the USA, you have to have fluorspar because the electrolyte makeup is LiF6P. So it's lithium hexafluorophosphate. So the negative ion is the hexaphosphate, and you need to marry with the lithium. The United States fluorspar has no fluorspar production. It was all in the 70s. So there's no domestic fluorspar production, and all of its fluorspar today is about 500,000 tons consumption a year, which is 5% of the global consumption. So U.S. consumes about 5% of the global fluorspar supply. All of that comes from Mexico. So U.S. is taking up about 50% of the Mexican fluorspar supply, and and then Mexico is the only country outside of China and Mongolia that's producing more than 5% of the fluorspar in the world. This is how precarious the situation is. China, since 2003, became a net importer of fluorspar from being a net exporter. So the Chinese consumption of fluorspar is actually close to 70% of the world fluorspar. They are taking in Mongolia production. All of Mongolia, half of Mongolia production, roughly about 70% of Mongolia production go to China, and the other 30% of Mongolia production go to Russia. So you're asking, why does Russia need? And they say, and then the 30% go to Russia is for weapons making, for aluminum, steel productions, because fluorspar is essential for steel and aluminum production. It's as a fluxing agent, and fluxing agent is when you smelt aluminum and steel into molten what you see on the television, right? You have to inject fluorspar, and the fluorspar is there to eat the impurities, and also and also they would put layers of fluorspar to avoid oxidation of your steel and of your aluminum, in order for your steel and aluminum to be of the highest grade, and also have that anti-rust nature. So Russia absolutely needs fluorspar for steel. And so if you talk about aluminum and steel production, if USA were to be self-sustainable for its steel production, aluminum production, power production from uranium, from solar panels that require fluorspar to be texturing the silicons and the protective layers, all of that need fluorspar. US will have to probably, most likely, quintuple. They need 5 times more fluorspar than they need today, because for China to be producing all the electrolyte for all the batteries and for all the steels and for the aluminum production, they're one of the world's largest steel and aluminum producer. And then for their uranium production, they cannot get enough fluorspar. One more thing, just to show you how acute the situation is. There are studies out there that China has more than 50 years of rare earth reserves in its reserves underground. They have less than 20 years of fluorspar left, and they are now going all out in securing fluorspar all over the world. They're investing very heavily in Africa, which is around 5% of fluorspar production right now supply. So there is a whole lot. There is a huge global competition in securing fluorspar resources, and it's taken us CleanTech over close to a year to get our first fluorspar project strategically located in the most prospective fluorspar producing region, historical fluorspar producing region in the Kentucky, Illinois belt in the United States. And lastly, I just want to also, lastly, Lars, is this is all the first-hand information I'm sharing with the audiences. We had another sister project that's exploring silver. And the whole reason I discovered fluorspar last year was I went to China in September to try to promote or attract investment for our silver project in South America. And all they talk about is fluorspar. And I didn't understand. And these are state-owned enterprise. And state-owned enterprise, Lars, I don't know if you talk to them, but they collect a very good salary. A mining manager in China that works for a state-owned enterprise makes about $30,000 to $50,000 a year. Their housing is paid for, their car is paid for, they have a chauffeur. They're quite well to do. But they say, John, can you get me a fluorspar? Can you get me a fluorspar? And I said, what does he use? He said, he just, as I mentioned to you, he told me about they need it for aluminum steel making, they need it for uranium, they need it for solar panels. And most of all, the principal driver up so far for a fluorspar is electrolyte. In order for them to continue to make car batteries for the BYDs, right, for the CATLs, they have to have fluorspar, and they don't have enough domestically. And they're going all out. There's an all-out war on getting fluorspar. And that's why fluorspar prices went up 50%. Since the year 2000. And that trend is not going to go away. And that's why I sort of gave you a primer about how the battery works from the start. And this is, the batteries is getting commercialized. And it's going to get maybe not much cheaper, but it could get cheaper from sodium ion batteries, because there's nothing more to replace from the anode, and there's nothing more to do for the cathode. The only thing left is the electrolyte. So once electrolyte is replaced by sodium from lithium, then the economics of batteries is substantially complete. You can't really get below $50 a kilowatt, like a kilowatt hour. I can't really go much lower than that. And it kept on 500, not even 10 years ago. But the attention to be made is in fluorspar, because that is the indispensable, the common element that's in all the liquid batteries today.
And how close are you on getting this fluorspar mining project you have invested in up and running and producing or mining fluorspar?
Right. We have a lot of knowledge. In the answer is we don't know right now, but it could be 1 to 2 years, within 18 months. It's a possibility. I want to actually preface, because there is not any investment in fluorspar in the entire United States. And all these projects right now are explored and drilled and mined 50 years ago, maybe even 60 years ago. So we acquired the project that has some historical exploration. We have to do some validation exploration in terms of drilling, and that could take about 6 to 9 months. We need to come out with an economic model and do some recovery testing, because the fluorspar coming out of the ground is around 30 to 60%. And for the metallurgical fluorspar, to chuck the fluorspar into a steel and aluminum smelter, you need to be about 80%. So, and then for the acid grade fluorspar, which goes into your batteries and go into your uranium nuclear plants, and you need to be at around 95% to 99%. So yeah, so that there has to be upgrade. Usually you will float the fluorspar kind of like you would concentrate your zinc and lead concentrate, and then from there you have to further refine it to the specific grade you're looking for. And so this is the mining and engineering part of it, and then there's also the permitting part of it. We don't have experience in permitting a project in Kentucky where the project's situated, but our understanding is there is not a federal permitting requirement, which is a big relief. And so we just acquired the project 10 days ago, and so we're very, very excited, and I think that there is going to be a global land grab, and fluorspar price is gone up 50%. Before, it's always oscillated between $150 to $300 from 2010 to 2020, and now from 2020 has a blip, and now it's trading from 300 to about 450 range. And from 2000 2010, it was about 100 to 200. From 2010 to 2020 is around 200 to 350. So you see that very steady. Increase in prices because of things all I mentioned about. And there are two more things I want to also actually reference. A lot of the fluorspar is consumed in nuclear, in electrolyte, and also in steel and aluminum making, like I was talking about. But increasing amount is also in it's called hexafluoride. What I mean is that when the Victoria's Secret model is married to a handsome Chad, it becomes very, very stable. So the hexafluoride gas is in all the major electrical switch. When you want to switch off, right, you have 3,000 volt high voltage. You need to have that insulation gas. So X is a very good insulator. And the fluorspar is also used in fluoropolymer for your Teflon when you frying pan. So because that is non-stick. And then all the refrigerant for your air conditioning, for your fridge. Again, you have that fluorspar, because fluorspar has a very low melting temperature when you marry with fluorocarbon. So that's why when you enter into a hot room, the fluorspar liquid would absorb the heat, vaporize, and that's how the room cools. And then once the fluorspar exits the room, you have a compressor to compress the gas back into a liquid. And the melting temperature for fluorocarbon is around -20 Celsius. So that's how the circle becomes. And because it's very stable gas, and has a very low melting temperature, that also is an excellent refrigerant for the cooling devices. And then not to mention, there's 20% of the fluorspar goes into 20% of the herbicide, pesticide, and pharmaceutical pills has fluorspar. Now, this is something maybe you should watch out for. Like personally for me, I watch for toothpaste without fluoride. And now I'm looking for anything pills that I take also want to be without fluoride. Maybe I'm more of a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's more to about their story about protecting your enamel, because I have 10 cavities. I was brushing fluoride paste for 20 years, and now I gave up. I replaced with other alternatives. So I think there's maybe some other reason they want to inject fluoride in your water and your medicine and your toothpaste. But nonetheless, I digress, Lars.
Yeah. So it sounds like this whole both EV boom and energy boom, also because now we have the whole artificial intelligence race where they are building these huge data centers that all need energy generation. And it seems like what you're saying, everything need this fluorspar. Are there enough supply of this fluorspar, or are we going to have a slowdown in all these things because of this material, do you think?
Yeah, it is extremely hard to find replacements. As I mentioned to you, if we were to focus on car, the alternative for the negative ion electrolyte would be chloro oxide. So the oxygen is also a reactive element that's negatively charged. But the problem with the oxygen, as you know, it heats up and it's volatile. And that's why oxygen-based electrolyte is not ideal for automobiles, nor is it a good idea to have energy storage in Nevada in the middle of a desert to have oxygen-based electrolyte, oxide-based electrolyte. So I think there are some alternatives, but none of it work as well as fluoride. I mean, especially semiconductor making, right? And also a solar panel making. None of this goes well as good as fluoride. I was reading too, Lars, I want to share with the audience is there's a lot of buzz because there's a nuclear renaissance. Again, there's people that talk about nuclear energy and uranium is making a strong comeback. But there's not enough uranium, just like there's not enough fluorspar. So there's a Swedish institute in Scandinavia, now and Norwegian actually, they're inventing, and now they have a breakthrough in thorium nuclear reactor. And thorium is 10 times more supply than uranium. And thorium, when you bombard thorium with the electron, it would create U-33. So thorium could be converted to uranium. And guess what the thorium fuel is? It is a lithium hexafluoride. So again, right? If you think about it, you have to, in order to stabilize, tame the beast, you gotta have something that's highly reactive. You know, the least reactive element, you gotta have something reactive to leach onto. So thorium is a very promising new generation of nuclear power. But the problem with thorium, there's always a problem, is when you bombard thorium, convert thorium to U-233, which is very visible, but you also have a byproduct, that's U-32. And U-32 is extremely nuclear reactive. And that's why the thorium modules has to have a very thick layer of protective layer. And also it needs to be almost completely automated because it's extremely highly radioactive. There's always pros and cons in every sort of new invention. However, I want to just go by the common denominator there is fluorspar. I don't have enough studies on the global fluorspar reserves. I think fluorspar is actually quite abundant. Okay. But fluorspar occurrence on Earth is not like it's a bit like uranium. It's very structurally controlled. And so it's not like an open pit, right? You find a giant fluorspar project that's laying on top on the surface, you scoop it up. It's usually a very structurally controlled mineralization. Usually, typically around sort of 0.5 meter to 3 to 5 meter in thickness, and so it's not easy to mine fluorspar. But there is quite a lot of fluorspar available. Mostly is in China, in Mongolia. And in Mexico. There are some fluorspar in the United States because there's a lack of exploration. We really don't know the reserves of these countries. But what we do know, though, is China is running out of fluorspar. And that is a very dangerous situation we're in. And now if we just care to search China fluorspar investment, right? You see they're investing in Africa, they're investing in outer Mongolia, in inner Mongolia, and they're going all over the place. And the Japanese took notice. And that's why you're actually seeing Japanese mining companies and traders invested in fluorspar project for the first time that I'm aware of in Australia. And so Australia is looking to start their first fluorspar project in recent history. And now we're just at the infancy of this renaissance in fluorspar. So I would highly recommend. I was losing my voice just talking about fluorspar. You can see how we're very excited in our news release. We're a mega firm believer, and we're at this very infancy of this huge fluorspar boom coming out in the next years and decades. This one's going to have a lot more legs than the nickel, than the nickel that we talked about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. So is it possible to recycle? Because we talked about that also in the last time, that both that LFP batteries will come in and help with the nickel lithium batteries because we didn't have enough lithium for it and so on. But we also talked about in 10, 20 years in the future that the recycling of batteries will also help with the shortage of the supply of these materials. Can fluorspar also be recycled like most of the other battery materials?
Right. I have to do some more research, but that's actually such a topic we should expand upon the downside of fluorspar, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it, if you depending on the application use, there's really two main applications. One is the inert nature of the fluorspar, of which you have the sulfur hexafluoride gas for the insulator, the refrigerant you use for your air conditioning, and then the electrolyte for your batteries. So these are really, you're not really consuming fluoride per se. It's an agent, it's a carrying agent, right? So I think that so there's really nothing to recycle per se. But then you also have fluorspar that you use as a pulp fiction use, right? Like when you want to dissolve something, like etching of a glass, you use fluorspar for your nuclear to your new. So some of that is possibly recyclable, and that's a possibility. So I would not be like at this time. I'm not. Fluorspar right now is trading at $400 a ton, so it's not a super expensive metal right now. I mean, $400 a ton is less than $1 a pound. Right, so compared to copper and aluminum and zinc and lead, is trading at 20 to 30% of these element costs. Yeah. So I think there are some areas that they're maybe recyclable, but it's like nickel is trading at $10, so it's trading at 20 times more expensive than fluorspar. So I don't think there's any talk about recycling fluorspar to reduce demand, fluorspar demand, or to reduce cost right now. It will sometime in the future when fluorspar doubles again, which I believe it will. There's fluorspar, like I said, at $400 a ton. A ton has 2,200 pounds. So fluorspar is trading at 50 cents a pound. It's a pound. So it's not very super expensive right now. When the price doubles again, the price is then people start thinking of recycling. The concern, though, which is what I want to get at, a little bit slow, is fluorspar is like carbon, it is causing greenhouse effect. Because imagine when the fluorspar gas evaporates, like if you have a leaky pipe from your refrigerant, it's not going to kill you because it's already married to fluorocarbon, hydrogen fluorocarbon, which is a very stable compound. So it's not going to kill you like corrode and eat your bones, right? No, and neither is when the sulfur hexafluoride gas leak from your electrical voltage switch. It's not going to kill you, or if you just spill your electrolyte into the field, it's not going to kill you. But the problem is the gas is highly inert, so it's not reactive. So the gas takes up to 100 years or 1,000 years to break down. When it breaks down, then it breaks down to fluoride, which the fluoride will easily marry to something else, right? Because it's very, very reactive. Yeah. So it is an agent that's not easily decomposed. So it will go to your atmosphere and it will clog up your ozone layer. I don't think it's as bad as eating away your ozone layer. And I am a believer of climate change, but I just don't believe that the global is warming. Maybe there's some talk about global is cooling, not warming. So I don't think it's necessarily a huge detriment, but the likes of TSMC and chip manufacturers, they do have some greenhouse emission targets. So there are studies of fluorine capture technology. So you want to I think it's definitely doable. It's something that's detectable, and there's technology out there talking about storage and capture of fluoride. I think that technology actually, Lars, I think it would be a booming technology. Just like 10 years ago, nobody talked about carbon capture technology, and I think over time, fluoride capture technology it would be a necessity going forward in preserving the environment, reduce global reduce greenhouse effect, and also some of these gas is toxic. So if you're using applications to etch glass or semiconductor in cleaning agent, and also in aluminum and steel, I mean the recycling and the capture of the fluoride residue is critical because they are highly toxic and corrosive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like this is an interesting topic that we're just getting to learn a little bit about, this fluorspar, and because it seems like it is in everything, no matter if you're talking nuclear power or energy storage or solar panels or whatever it is. So, and definitely something we need to keep an eye on. But is there something about this whole space that you think we need to talk about before I'll let you go again, John?
Well, as I mentioned, there's a lot of merits to that: semiconductor, power generation in nuclear and solar, energy storage in lithium and sodium, energy generation also in nuclear, and so you're looking at and then the day-to-day in steel, aluminum making. As I mentioned to you, on the downside, right, fluorspar is used for maybe some nefarious purposes. So when you buy your pharma pills, make sure you don't have fluorspar content. Fluorspar is unfortunately not. It is a mineral. It's not a metal, and it's not like I want to buy a silver coin, right? I want to buy a gold coin. I want to keep it at home. It's an investment. It's a purple in nature, so sometimes when you go to stores, you can see some fluorspar. It is toxic, corrosive. So you don't want to buy a fluorspar and keep it at home and touch it. It's it'll break down. And it's toxic. So the only way to really invest in fluorspar is fluorspar mines, and the only mines out there available is Mexico and Mongolia, and there's going to be. I think now people are starting to take notice. And CleanTech Vanadium, it used to be called CleanTech Vanadium, but right now we call it CleanTech CTV. Is one of the very few, I think only one or two mining companies listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange that actually has exposure to fluorspar. And so I highly recommend your audience check us out. And not only is this fluorspar project we just acquired, that we believe has historical resource about 800,000 tons. And usually when you do a mining company, you would produce around 10% of the resource. So, this project could potentially supply at this current rate, 2 years from now, 10% of the demand from the U.S. today. That's today's number.
20?
Well, the U.S. consumption of fluorspar today is around 300,000 tons. So 10% of that is around 40,000 tons. Yeah. So that would be a right configuration of a mine of the size of which we just acquired. But in addition, though, we have a vanadium project that we spent over $30 million, almost $30 million we acquired since 2017. So that project in Nevada is permitted by the Bureau of Land Management, federal agency. And Lars, when I jumped on vanadium almost 8 years ago, and because I was excited about vanadium's prospects in the battery space. Vanadium batteries, it solves the problem. The problem it solves is there is a degradation of oxide of the anode because there's always a reaction of lithium and graphite on the anode. Over time, the graphite will lose its purity and it would start to lose its ability to hold charges. The electrolyte over time will also have chemical reactions, and the cathode, right, the MnCa11 or iron phosphate cathode will also degrade over time because the elements, the compositions of the electrolyte, the anode and cathodes are different elements. But the beauty of vanadium batteries was the anode was vanadium, the cathode is vanadium, and electrolyte is vanadium, because vanadium is the only element in the world that can go +3, +4, +3, +4, +5, and it's also inert transition metal. So it can do everything. So vanadium batteries is ideal in that it solves the problem of mine life. A vanadium battery can go for 40 years. However, vanadium's problem was it's too expensive. When vanadium boom started, when I first got into vanadium price went from $4 a pound, which is around the same price as nickel, to $40 a pound in 6 months. In 6 months, the speculators came in. Not surprising enough, 60% of the vanadium produced in China. China consumes most of the vanadium. So China has some inspection of the vanadium plants and vanadium mines, and that put vanadium in a screeching halt supply in the summer of 2018, I believe. The vanadium price went from $4 a pound to 40. So, and then people look at it, well, just kind of like cobalt, right? It's just not a candidate, a long-term viable solution to energy storage. You need to produce very quickly a lot of this abundant supply and stable in price. So vanadium came all the way crashing down to about $4 a pound when everything gets started. Vanadium is going to have the time of the day in a lot of the space-age alloys. All the missiles require vanadium because strengthened steel. But compared to fluorspar, I'm a lot more bullish of fluorspar because vanadium is around 5% of vanadium went to bad. Like fluorspar has such a wide range of applications. And the further you study fluorspar, further you find that it's really indispensable and irreplaceable element in the modern infrastructure era.
Yeah, cool. So, John, if people want to dive deeper and learn more, where can they find you?
Yes, check us out, CleanTech CTV. So it's CleanTech CTV, or just search CleanTech John Lee. We have produced a number of very interesting videos in-house to show you how fluorspar works in the nuclear industry, how fluorspar works in the EV space, in the battery space, how fluorspar works in the semiconductor industry, and we're going to continue to produce content and show the audience. This is we're just very excited about the prospect of fluorspar. This is not so much sort of a one-hit wonder, right? And then the next thing you know, you're getting substituted. It's a very exciting vertical, and check us out. You can always email me at jlee@cleantechctv.com. And I really look forward to getting some of your audience coming on for the ride. This is at the absolute infancy. Oh, I want to share actually just 60 seconds with you. Yeah. As I mentioned to you, CleanTech, we had to sell our nickel project willingly or otherwise to our first Aboriginal partner. Fortunately, our project in Kentucky doesn't have the Aboriginal element to it, but the company still has $3 million in cash for these equity investors that this is your audience. Our market capitalization is $4 million because we went through that vanadium downfall, and then our nickel project was sold out of our hands. So we're trading at pretty much cash value. And we have a vanadium project. We spent $30 million, fully permitting in Nevada, and we're just waiting for the right price for vanadium to reactivate that project, to put that mine into production. And the management is very, very knowledgeable in operating in the United States. And so we feel we have all the elements in place. And we don't know in the short term where fluorspar is going to take us in our valuation. But we're very, very confident as we steadily getting the story out, and as gradually people waking up to the fluorspar fundamentals, that the company is going to be around for a while, and we're going to be talking about fluorspar for the weeks and months and maybe years to come.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting, John. Well, I will of course leave links down below to all this information from John, so check that one out if you want to learn more. And John, thank you so much for taking the time here to make us all a little bit brighter about the whole mining and supply chain of the whole energy sector. Thank you so much, John.
Well, it's my pleasure, Ross. Thank you very much.
Thank you.